Namaste and welcome to our continuing series, The Synthesis of Yoga with our dear Ranganath. And we are on the chapter
Threefold Life.
The Threefold Life. And we
Page
are
27.
27 and second paragraph. But if progress.
So, since we are doing this only once a week, I'll tell you what he has said in the previous para so that we get the sense of continuity. So, just as in the previous para, I'm just reading out the summary of what he said in the previous para. Just as the mental life can concentrate itself only on its individual aims, with perfect indifference to the good of the collectivity, so too the spiritual life can do the same. It may use the conveniences in the universe for personal liberation only. The world of multiplicity is in a constant flux and is permanently fixed in its imperfections, and the spiritual planes above are eternally immutable. So it is conceived, and therefore the ascetic's aim is to somehow reach the eternal silence, which is the permanent immutability. So he aims at reaching the eternal, the eternal anyhow, by using whatever the universe can provide, however insignificant these worldly forms and means. Okay? He is going to use these limited things to rise to the higher level, like a scaffolding. Once you have reached, you don't need the scaffoldings. Therefore, for the spiritual life, there is a great indifference to the world's activities. Okay? But when the yogi achieves his liberty, his rejection of the world is final. Many have understood the Gita to mean this. In other words, the individual liberation. But Sri Aurobindo will state the truth regarding this matter in the next para. It is also possible for the spiritual life, without abandoning the material world, to pour love, compassion, charitable deeds to all humanity. But this cannot and will not remove the permanent imperfections of the material world. There is no general transformation, and the world continues to remain forever the field of dualities, pain, suffering, and death. Okay? So, in other words, what he's saying is that the individual concentrates only on his liberation and gives up the physical world when he retains his individuality. But there are others who are not that spiritually selfish. They try to help mankind and try and relieve their suffering. But even what they do, because they are stationed in the spiritual planes of consciousness, which we call level 2, he is unable to solve the permanent problems of the physical world. Individuals he may help, but there is no transformation of the world's imperfections. For that, you have to go to the next level. Okay? So now we'll read the next para, then you'll understand the context. But if progress also is one of the chief terms of world existence, I'll read the para first, then we come back to it. And a progressive manifestation of the divine, the true sense of nature, this limitation also is invalid. It is possible for the spiritual life in the world. It is possible for the spiritual life in the world, and it is its real mission to change the material life into its own image, the image of the divine. Therefore, besides the great solitaries who have sought and attained their self-liberation, we have the great spiritual teachers who have also liberated others, and supreme of all, the great dynamic souls who, feeling themselves stronger in the might of the spirit than all the forces of the material life banded together, have thrown themselves upon the world, grappled with it in a loving wrestle, and striven to compel its consent to its own transfiguration. Ordinarily, the effort is concentrated on a mental and moral change in humanity, but it may extend itself also to the alterations of the forms of our life and its institutions, so that they too may be a better mold for the inpourings of the Spirit. These attempts have been the supreme landmarks in the progressive development of human ideals and the divine preparation of the race. Every one of them, whatever its outward results, has left earth more capable of heaven and quickened in its tardy movements the evolutionary yoga of nature. So, this is what he's saying. We'll go back to the beginning of the para. Essentially, he is giving you all the various stages of development. The individual concentrates only on his liberation using the imperfect instruments of the physical world, his body, his vital and his mind. And once he has managed to get the liberation in the spiritual planes of consciousness, which is the second level. Okay, the first level is the plane of multiplicity, body, mind, life. Matter, life and mind universally, individually, body, vital and mind. And once he escapes, he is no more interested in the physical world, gives it up. Fine. So, Sri Aurobindo says that this is slightly spiritually you can consider it's a very great achievement, but it is spiritually, if you see from another angle, a little selfish. You are interested only in yourself and you are trying to help the others. So there are others also who try to help, but from the spiritual level, you can help to a certain extent, certainly. You can even liberate others. In fact, this is what happens. In the previous one, if you remember in the spiritual life, he has said that a spiritual man liberates others as the animal reproduces itself.
Life divine, he says.
In Life Divine, he has said that. Okay, so here also the same idea is there. A spiritual man gets his disciples, and this always happens. And an interesting fact is that these disciples who gather round a spiritual giant, they have a tendency to appear together in the next life also. They come together. Ramakrishna could recognize many of his disciples in his previous life. Okay, and Sri Aurobindo also. He has not gone into very specific, but they have.
Dilip.
Dilip Raj.
Dilip Raj is one.
Nolinida.
Nolinida also maybe. But he has also spoken about Dorasamy Iyengar. In his previous life, he was a king in France. Okay, so they do. So those people who help from the spiritual level, they help individuals, but they can't change the world conditions which the ascetic considers to be permanently imperfect. Sri Aurobindo is saying, he is starting the para with, but if progress also is one of the chief terms of world existence, that means it is not necessarily permanently imperfect. He brings in the idea of evolution, and before life came there was only matter, then life came up, then mind came up. So where is it permanently imperfect? It is not. So you can go to the next level, and that's what he proposes to do with the third level. From there you will have the power to change also, transform the forms of life, and he's using a very interesting word. He says these forms become suitable molds for the inpourings of the Spirit. He has used very interesting word. We'll have a look at that. So, but if he's beginning the sentence with but, okay. Teachers of English will tell you never begin a sentence with and with but. But Sri Aurobindo is all the time breaking his grammatical rules. Sometimes he uses a sentence without a verb.
And he has done it like in the last 3 paragraphs, it is starting with but.
Yes. The meaning becomes obvious. So for instance, he's talking of imprisonment of the life of the soul in the body. Then he'll begin the next one, and then liberation. Very clear what he means. Yeah. So we go by each sentence. So he's beginning here with, but if progress is one of the chief terms of world existence, the physical world, He is not talking of the other worlds. He is talking of physical life. He says there also there is progress. He has used the word progress, but he also means evolution. In other words, the impermanence, the defects of the physical world, there are plenty of defects, we know that. But they are not permanent. They can be changed. And this being slowly changed over millions of years, it is slowly changing. But if progress also is one of the chief terms of world existence, and a progressive manifestation of the divine, the true sense of nature, the limitation is also invalid. The limitation in the physical world is not valid. It can change. Okay?
Why is progress with capital P?
I think he's meaning evolution. That's why.
Progress is something very fundamental.
Yes, yeah. If he uses progress with a lowercase key, it will be your progress, my progress, okay? Even the progress of an athlete. But here he's meaning something much more fundamental. He's talking of spiritual progress. That's why P cap. Okay? And the progressive manifest. Look at the next one. The word progressive with a lowercase p. Okay? Manifestation of the divine. The true sense of nature, the limitation is also invalid. It is possible for the spiritual life in the world, and it is its real mission to change the material life into its own image. So he says the mental man must become the spiritual man, and even the divine man. Okay? Not only spiritual man, even the divine man in his own image, the image of the divine. Therefore, besides the great solitaries who have sought and attained their self-liberation, we have the great spiritual teachers who have also liberated others, and supreme of all, the great dynamic souls who, feeling themselves stronger in the might of the Spirit than all the forces of the material world, banded together, have thrown themselves upon the world, grappled with it in a loving wrestle, and striven to compel its consent to its own transfiguration. It's a very big sentence, and we'll look. He is talking of 3 levels. Okay? The great solitaries. Note, the solitary implication is that they are interested only in the individual liberation. The great solitaries. So, and he is calling them great. So, he is not deriding, or he is not belittling the spiritual impulse of only liberation. He is not saying that. It's fine, but there is something more also that can be done. Okay?
In one of his aphorisms regarding the solitaries, he says that a meditating ascetic in the Himalayas dreamed, and that is why the French Revolution came.
Yes, exactly. That's right. Somebody sitting out his consciousness is spreading these ideas and these influences all over, and those who can catch it, they execute it in the world. Exactly. Okay? Therefore, besides the great solitaries who have sought and attained their self-liberation, so that's in level 1, we have the great spiritual teachers. Okay? Ramakrishna, Sri Aurobindo, Raman Maharshi, okay? Not to mention others. These are the most prominent in this century, not last century. Okay? Who have liberated others, and supreme of all, now the 3rd level, the great dynamic souls. So interesting, see the words he is using, the great solitaries, and even they are great. Then they are the great spiritual teachers, okay, who have done that. Then there are the great dynamic souls who, feeling themselves stronger in the might of the Spirit than all the forces of the material world, banded together, okay, have thrown themselves upon the world, grappled with it in a loving wrestle. The wrestle is not unwilling, it is a loving. You love mankind and you want to help them. So loving wrestle. Wrestling is very rarely loving. So Sevda is so fond of oxymorons. All the time he is using contradictory words. Okay, so loving wrestle. It makes so much sense. So, in a loving wrestle, and striven to compel its consent to its own transfiguration. The world doesn't want to change. Okay? In fact, it says in Savitri, the world is in love with its own imperfections and doesn't want to change. But here, these great dynamic souls, okay? The others are only great spiritual teachers, but these are dynamic souls. Dynamic means with tremendous power, and they are able to achieve what they want to do. So these great dynamic souls, feeling themselves stronger in the might of the spirit than all the forces of the material life. This is the theme of Savitri. Savitri feels herself to be stronger than all the forces arrayed against her, and even death. So that's what he's saying. So who would these dynamic great souls be? I can think of only two. Mother and Sri Aurobindo. I don't know if there have been others, but he's not mentioning anybody. He can't mention himself. So obviously, we have to do that. Okay?
He speaks about Vivekananda in the Karma Yogin thus, that the soul chosen by the master to take the world between his two hands and change it.
Yeah.
So that's a very huge compliment
Yeah.
to Vivekananda. Yeah, so.
Of course. Vivekananda also, remember, okay, he brought about huge changes, and of course he is a Vibhuti, he's not an avatar. But his work was to take Vedanta to the West and teach them. That was his life mission, and he did that very, very successfully. So, the great dynamic souls who, and it's interesting, you can see, as soon as Vivekananda realized his own soul, he spat out the body. It disappeared into the infinite. Okay. So therefore, the great soul, we have done that. Okay. In a loving vessel and striven to compel its consent to its own transfiguration. Ordinarily, the effort is concentrated on a mental and moral change in humanity. Yes, there are many people who try to bring in improvements, very small improvements in many, many ways, okay? Morally, mentally, okay? But it may extend itself also to the alteration of the forms of our life and its institutions, so that they too may be a better mold for the inpourings of the Spirit. Fantastic image he is using here. You have to make yourself a mold which is capable of receiving what the divine is pouring into you. Okay. This is here he has used the word a better mold for the inpourings of the Spirit. In Savitri, he uses the divine, death becomes transformed and says to Savitri, I will use you, I will pour all my power and everything into these jars. He uses the word jars there. So here is a mold he is using.
Like here I'm like reminded of Auroville in the ashram, institutionally they are like instruments for that dynamic change and action in the whole world.
Yeah, but first they have to transform themselves. Okay, so ordinarily the effort is concentrated on a mental and moral change in humanity, but it may extend itself also to the alteration of the forms of our life and its institutions, so that they too may be a better mold for the inpourings of the Spirit. These attempts have been the supreme landmarks in the progressive development of human ideals and the divine preparation of the race. Every one of them, whatever its outward results, has left earth more capable of heaven and quickened in its tardy movements the evolutionary yoga of nature. So there's an individual yoga and there's a evolutionary yoga of nature. Nature herself also progressing. I will replace the word evolutionary yoga of nature by the word evolution, spiritual evolution. Okay? So that's what he's saying. And he's using very interesting words again. He has left earth more capable of heaven, marrying the soil to the sky. So the values of the heaven must come down into the physical world. And that is possible ultimately. Right now, it is not like that, but it's slowly going towards that. So, clear? We go to the next para. In India, for the last 1,000 years or more, the spiritual life and the material, he has eliminated life, okay? You have to Understand that. In India, for the last 1,000 years or more, the spiritual life and the material life have existed side by side to the exclusion of the progressive mind. Okay, now we have to understand what he means by the progressive mind. The mind that is trying to bring progress. He has told you the three characteristics. The characteristics of bodily life is self-preservation, self-multiplication, self-reproduction. Then he has told you that the basic characteristics of mental life is progress, change, and improvement. Okay? So that's exactly what he uses. When he uses the word progressive mind, he wants in the physical world progress upwards. That is what science is doing. Okay? It's trying to give better health to people. It is trying to control the forces of nature. Okay, we are trying to. The storm comes and destroys so much. So now, even if we can at least forecast the storm coming, we can save so many lives. It's a progress. So science is doing exactly. It's a progressive mind. Okay, so the progressive mind was there in the West from the last 400-500 years. It was there in India long time back, 5,000 years back. In the Vedic period, it was there. But it got completely eliminated due to many, many reasons. Okay, there was the Mughal invasion, then there was the Buddhistic idea that the world has no importance at all and worth rejecting. So all these ideas settled in the Indian race for many, many years. Okay, so in India for the last 1,000 years or more, the spiritual life and the material have existed side by side to the exclusion of the progressive mind. The progressive mind completely disappeared in India. Spirituality has made terms for itself with matter by renouncing the attempt at general progress. Social progress and general progress, there was no attempt at all. Individual progress, yes. That's why he has used general progress. Individual progress was always there in India. The spiritual life never disappeared in India, but it was protected in small pockets, here, there, here, there. It never disappeared. But general progress and improvement in quality of life was not there for the last 1,000 years or more. So more than 1,000 years. He is being very general. And also he is saying more than 1,000 years because he is including Shankara in it. Not Shankara really, but Shankara's the idea of Mayavada, which has been misunderstood. 8th century. So that also is now 1,500 years.
Does Shankara count as progressive mind?
No. So progressive mind work in the physical world. Science. Improvement of health, improvement of your transport facilities. That's what he means by progressive.
Which is the last great mathematician in India was Bhaskaracharya. He was somewhere in the 6th century.
Okay, 6th century, AD? So that's why he is saying in a very general way, 1,000 years.
Yeah. Not remembering his main achievement. But he had written a book called Leelavati. It was his daughter's name and it was a treatise on mathematics. And it was something fantastic.
Yes, Bhaskaracharya, yes. So, but it is certainly nowhere near the Vedic period. The Vedic period was a fantastic period of tremendous knowledge. Tremendous knowledge. Astronomy, metallurgy, the
Health and surgery. Health and surgery, they were very advanced
yes,
in that.
surgery, everything. There was a tremendous amount of progress. But that was gone. There was no rejection of the physical world in the Vedic period. So,
They have a beautiful depiction of this in the Akshardham temple in Delhi, where they take you through a boat ride and they show you the entire progress of
Where
the
is that?
Vedic age. In Delhi, in Akshardham temple. They have preserved it.
Akshardham,
and,
okay.
The
Yeah.
problem is that because the dates of history are not well known, so the Vedic period is a big guess. It's like huge gap.
Yeah, nobody knows exactly how many years. Nobody knows. The historical sense was not so much developed in India.
He actually acknowledges this in the foundations of Indian culture. He says that it has to be admitted that they did not record history that properly as they should have.
Yeah.
It's one of the gaps of the Indian mind, he says.
And one of the main causes for that is that what is there in the physical world is fleeting. It is transient. There is no permanence here. That's why. Okay. In India for the last, so progressive mind, okay. So spirituality has made it terms for itself with matter when he says with matter, it doesn't mean matter. He means material life. Okay, he is using very abstract language with material life. By renouncing the attempt at general progress, I don't want to spend my energy. The spiritual man would say in India, I don't want to spend my energy trying to improve health and trying to improve the way I can transport myself from one place to another. I'll put all my energy into something much more fundamental. I want to improve my consciousness. That's what he's saying here. By renouncing the attempt at general progress, it was a specific movement, okay? It has obtained from society the right of free spiritual development for all who assume some distinctive symbol, such as the garb of the sannyasin. The recognition of that life as man's goal and those who live it as worthy of an absolute reverence, and the casting of society itself into such a religious mold that its most customary acts should be accompanied by formal reminder of the spiritual symbolism of life and its ultimate destination. So, although Indian society gave up the attempt at improving physical life, they were concentrating on the spiritual life. They allowed some, not everybody. And those who, so how to distinguish between them? You have to wear the the ochre robes, okay? What is Gerwa clothes you have to wear. So society knows that you are making an attempt at, so they won't disturb you and they'll respect you. That's what somebody is saying, reverence, okay? It has obtained from society the right of free spiritual development for all who assume some distinctive symbol, such as the garb of the sannyasin. The recognition of that life as man's goal and those who live it as worthy of an absolute reverence, and the casting of society itself into such a religious mold that its most customary acts should be accompanied by formal reminder of the spiritual symbolism of life and its ultimate destination. This is a very interesting thing which did not exist in Europe and the West. In India, religion is woven intimately into the fabric of life here in India. Okay, if there's a newborn child, there's a religious ceremony. The moment he starts getting his the first education, over he gets his sacred thread, and there is the very first solid food that he eats. There is also a ceremony. Okay, if there is a conference, you light a lamp first and invoke Saraswati. Everything is intimate. You move into a new house, Griha Pravesham. You have this spiritual ceremony. So the idea of secularism in India is completely misunderstood. It is so intimately, religion is so intimately tied with life that you can't separate the two. In West, they did exactly the opposite. Because the so-called spiritual, not spiritual, but the church was constantly interfering in science. And it was a very retrogressive force. It was not allowing.
He speaks about this in the essay on the Gita.
Yes. So, there they had to separate, and secularism became a very, you remain in the church and do what you want, but don't disturb normal general society, don't disturb.
Because the church had become very tyrannical.
Yes, and they were actually,
Inquisition time.
yeah.
Inquisition time.
Yes, that's right, Inquisition. The famous story of Galileo and all that we know, okay? They were actually threatened and they were excommunicated. They were even burnt at the stake. All these things were being done. In India, no such problem at all. Religion and life. Secularism in India would mean that you don't allow the ideas of religion to interfere in your government. The government must not judge people by their religion. Everything must be, that's why the uniform civil code. And in India, we have not been able to do that. But the constitution wants a uniform civil code. They are trying to bring it in now. Religion should not interfere. Okay? So this is what I am saying here. Worthy of a absolute reverence and the casting of society itself into a religious mold that is most customary acts. Everything that you do. Okay? Even before eating, you dedicate your food to the Lord. Okay? So everything is oriented towards the divine. And the aim of life is not forgotten. That the aim of life is spiritual liberation. Okay? Very clear. On the other hand, there was conceded to society the right of inertia and immobile self-conservation. That's what happened in India. That's why poverty, illiteracy, uncleanliness, all these things came in because of that. The world has no importance. Don't give any importance to it. So this was contributed by Buddhistic ideas and also by the later on by the Mayavadin ideas. So the world has no importance at all.
They say it doesn't even exist.
Huh?
They say it doesn't even exist.
Yes, they go to that extent. The world is not, it is illusion.
And they say that you don't exist. They say there is no individuality. They say there is no individual.
Yeah, that's right. They mix up, the Buddhists mix up the individuality and the ego.
Whereas the Gita is so categorical that the individual is eternal. It is an eternal portion of the divine.
That's right. But that's a true individual as against the ego. But if you mix up the two, there's a problem. At our level, we are constantly confusing ego and individuality. Your individuality is your spiritual being, essence, the soul. But we think it is our individual. This is me. You are not me. This is something which will disappear after your death. Okay? So that's the whole thing. That's what I'm saying. So, on the other hand, there was conceded to society the right of inertia and immobile self-conservation. Immobile, no progress at all. The concession destroyed much of the value of the terms. The religious mold being fixed, the formal reminder tended to become routine and to lose its living sense. You follow what he's saying? Although religion was very much a part of Indian life, in the physical world, since you consider it to be unreal, it became only a mechanical act. When you are invoking the divine, it becomes a mechanical act. Even the recital of the Vedas is all mechanical. I remember we have a boy here called Anish. Okay, he is a Brahmin, and all the Brahmins in India, they are very, very particular. Purusha Sukta, you have to recite even when you are a child of 3, 4. He said, I never understood what it was, but I knew it by heart. Now he has studied Sanskrit, he knows what it is. So mechanically you go on reciting the Vedas. Even the Patashalas, I doubt very much whether they really understand the Vedas, but they make it by heart. So, they were saying, the sentence is clear now, see? The concession destroyed much of the value of the terms. The religious mold being fixed, the formal reminder, invoking the divine for everything in life, okay? Whether it be a conference or whether it be a new stage in your life, everything, okay? The moving into a new house, everything. The formal reminder tended to become routine and to lose its living sense. It can happen even now when we go to the Samadhi, okay? I'm giving a very interesting example, but I'm not, don't take it in a critical spirit. But when you go to the Samadhi and you are bowing down, you may be thinking of your dinner. So, it becomes a mechanical routine without a living sense. But it can be brought back, so you have to do that. So, that is very, very common. Or you would see also in the people who take the dhoop, okay, and do that, but they look around, who is coming, who is going. So, the living sense is gone. Only the outer mechanical action is there. That's what happened in society, you see. Okay, so the religious mold being fixed, the formal reminder tended to become a routine and to lose its living sense. The constant attempts to change the mold by new sects and religions ended only in a new routine or a modification of the old. For the saving element of the free and active mind had been exiled. Here he is using different words. Here, earlier he said progressive mind. Here he is saying free and active mind had been exiled. Today in India it is not like that. It is slowly coming back, and everybody over the world is realizing that India will become, even in science and material life, it's going to become one of the top in the next 10 years. So that exile period has disappeared in India now. Okay, so fortunately.
Actually, it can be said, I mean, IT is picking up a lot in
Yes.
today's times.
Yeah.
And they say that if you see in Silicon Valley,
Yeah.
literally every third person is an Indian.
Yeah.
And they're holding some of the top positions there. Obviously,
Yeah.
they're very brainy people.
Yeah.
Just that they were suppressed by the British, and now that they've come out of that suppression, they are expressing themselves.
That's right. Not only that, even in finance, okay, the chief scientist in IM, the International Monetary Fund, is an Indian, and there are others also in the top banks. Okay,
Even
they're
in
all
the health
Indians.
field, even
Huh?
in the field of health,
Yeah.
like the West is opening to India.
Yeah. So, in fact, the other day there was a very interesting article by Tony Abbott. Abbott, he's the Prime Minister of Australia. He is saying very clearly that India will be the leader in every field in the next 5-10 years. That is sure. That's why they are now tying themselves up with India so much. Okay, a free trade and military cooperation, everything. Australia has understood that. So that period of entire exile from the physical world, fortunately, gone. But it did its damage for thousands of years. It has done its damage. But we are seeing the negative aspect. But the positive aspect is that it kept up the spiritual life. But in small pockets. That was the whole thing. But today, Modi has been able to introduce the idea of yoga all over the world. It's now a international yoga day is there in United Nations. So he has been able to make mankind aware that there is something more than material progress. Okay. Of course, the idea of yoga is
Yoga asana.
yoga is only asanas, but even that is a very modest start. But it will develop into something more detailed than that. Okay, so the saving element of the free and active mind had been exiled. The material life handed over to the ignorance, the purposeless and endless duality became a leaden and dolorous yoke from which flight was the only escape. So that's why he's actually giving a justification for the ascetic. He's saying that it became impossible for the one who is wanting a spiritual life to remain in the physical world. Okay, it became too much. So there are no progressive ideas, no amount of improvement, nothing at all. So he had to run away from the physical life, physical world. Okay, so the material life handed over to the ignorance. Look at that, handed over to the ignorance. Surrendered completely. Okay, handed over to the ignorance, the purposeless and endless duality. This word duality is very important. You have to understand duality, and we shall have occasion to dwell on that, but I will repeat, okay? In the physical world, even science is admitting that to every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. So if there is good, there is bad. If there is gentleness, there is also force and violence. There is everything in the physical world. If there is generosity, there is miserliness. So if there is compassion, there is also cruelty. This is the physical world. This is how it is. And that is because when the divine creates, he does not create only a certain section. He creates the whole gamut, the whole range he creates. So you get this side infinity and that side infinity. Plus infinity and negative infinity. So for any principle you take, the two sides are there, and we see them as opposites in the physical world, but they are not opposites. They are the same in different quantum. Okay, they are the same, which you see when you go to the next level of consciousness. So that brings us to the end of the para. The material life handed over to the ignorance, the purposeless and endless duality became a leaden and dolorous yoke from which flight was the only escape. Note the word endless duality. Endless. Endless means permanently imperfect here in the physical world. Okay? So that was what was considered. That was what, because of that they left. Okay? But it is not endless. That's what Srinivas will tell you in the next paras. Okay? So, the schools of Indian yoga lend themselves to the compromise. Individual perfection or liberation was made the aim. seclusion of some kind from the ordinary activities, the condition, renunciation of life, the culmination. The teacher gave his knowledge only to a small circle of disciples, or if a wider movement was attempted, it was still the release of the individual soul that remained the aim. The pact with an immobile society was, for the most part, observed. There was no attempt at conquest of the imperfections in the physical world. There was no attempt at all. Individual, yes, escape. Escape is the only meaning of life. That's what happened. Now, the schools of Indian yoga. Basically, the schools of Indian yoga are, actually there are any number, but basically you understand only 3 or 4. Huh? Jnana yoga, bhakti yoga, karma yoga. But there are many others also. There is hatha yoga, there is tantra. Okay. Now, Raja Yoga. Raj Yoga is actually Jnana Yoga in a certain form, but with very specific things. Then there is Kriya Yoga, okay, made by Lahiri Mosai. Lahiri Mosai has done Kriya Yoga. And now Sri Aurobindo has introduced Integral Yoga, which includes all the essence of all these things he has included. So many yogas are there. He's not talking of his own yoga. He's talking of the schools of Indian yoga lend themselves to the compromise. Okay, our aim is only individual liberation, not collective liberation. So, lend themselves to the compromise. Individual perfection or liberation was made the aim. Seclusion of some kind from the ordinary activities, the condition. You can't lead a spiritual life if you are in the physical world. Your family will constantly pull you into their activities, and the dirt of the physical world will color you and make you dirty. So go away and remain there. It's an escape. It's an escape. But still it's a solution, temporary solution. Okay. So the individual perfection and liberation was made the aim. Seclusion of some kind from the ordinary activities, the condition. He's saying of some kind, because you could run away to the Himalayas, you could run away to the forest, but you could also be stationed in your own attic and not be disturbed by the others. Okay. So of some kind. Okay. So there are so many kinds of seclusion. From the ordinary activities, the condition, the renunciation of life, the culmination. Ultimately, the aim is liberation, get away from society and try to get your liberation. Okay? The teacher gave his knowledge only to a small circle of disciples, or not like today on the internet. You have a vast audience and everybody who is ready can benefit. In the past, even if they were ready, there is no one to teach you. That's what he's saying. Okay, so the teacher gave his knowledge only to a small circle of disciples, or if a wider movement was attempted, it was still the release of the individual soul that remained the aim. The pact with an immobile society was, for the most part, observed. Let society do what it wants. We won't try to improve that. Individually, we'll try to escape.